Okay, so just had some thoughts on the current status of our sci-fi fandoms, especially concerning the Star Wars fan base and everything that's been going on with it recently. And just felt like I wanted to kind of share my opinion on things, and I'm happy to hear what you guys think. So if you have any insight into this, please share in the comments. But there's been a lot going on with the streaming series and the sequel trilogy and the divisiveness of that with the fan base. Uh, but all in all, I think Star Wars is still finding its footing since Disney has it. Disney has done good. You have stuff like Rogue One, which was awesome in my opinion, and The Mandalorian, which really started out strong and was really good as a streaming series. I'm not really too excited about it being turned into a movie. We'll see how that works out. I think it's better suited for the episodic stories that it was. But we'll see how this transition goes. I do love the character development in that series. I am not the biggest fan of the prequel trilogies because I felt like they rushed into those movies without having a solid idea of what they wanted to do. And so as they were making those movies, they kept changing their minds about what they wanted to do with it, and it just led to some very bad decisions and a lot of discontinuity between the three films, and just kind of made a confusing mess. The characters, I didn't hate any of the characters. I thought that they were not utilized to their fullest potential, and I thought that they were very limited by the way they were written. But the concepts of the characters themselves, I thought were pretty good, and they could have been a lot better if they were executed in a better way than they were. Again, I think the leadership involved with those movies just hadn't made a clear decision on what they wanted, and they tried to decide that as they were going, and that's the worst way to make films, because then you're trying to backpedal and correct as you go, and that just confuses the hell out of the audience, and that's what those films did for most of the audience. We have a lot of development on the series front with Andor, which I feel like has turned out to be one of the best Star Wars products that has been put out by Disney. And again, that comes from the expertise of the writing involved and the freedom that those writers are given in that project, and not being micromanaged every step along the way. And it was one of the rare instances where the story of Star Wars isn't focusing on the Force or the battle between the Jedi and the Sith, because Star Wars is so much more than that, and that's what people have to start getting used to. It's not about Jedi and Sith. It's not about the dark side of the Force and the light side of the Force. That is a core of what Star Wars is, but that isn't the totality of what Star Wars is. So we don't need to be dependent on those to carry Star Wars stories. There's so many more stories to be told. There's so much more room in that galaxy. It doesn't need to revolve around those kind of stories. And I think that Andor has proven that. And I think that even The Mandalorian, to an extent, also was less focused on the Force and the Jedi and the Sith and all of that part of the Star Wars lore, and was very successful. So I think there's been a certain level of exhaustion in the audience with that aspect of the storytelling, and we need kind of a little bit of a break of that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have any more Star Wars that focuses on that, because that is a core representation of what the Star Wars universe is about. So of course we should always have some content that deals with that. But I think that we should get more comfortable as fans and as the creators of these contents for this franchise, of reaching outside of that box and being more creative with the stories. As long as we are able to have stories that fit the confines of that reality, then I think there's plenty of diversity to go around. I feel like that the fan base needs to be more accepting of evolution of Star Wars, because it can't stay what it was in the 70s. It can't even stay what it was in the 90s. I mean, it has to keep growing, because when the prequels came out, that wasn't the Star Wars that us OG fans had when we were growing up in the 70s and 80s. And, and initially there was backlash about that. But you don't hear about that now. The prequels are held in pretty good regard. And now we have this new set of movies that creates the divisiveness. And as a fan base, we need to be more accepting of the fact that Star Wars has to continue to evolve, or it's going to be something that eventually goes away. It's not going to stand the test of time, because it's going to become outdated. It's going to become something that is no longer relevant. And so if it needs to stay relevant, it needs to continue to evolve. It needs to be different, it needs to encompass things that will connect it to the newer audience that is now being exposed to it. And that's just life. Life never stays the same. Life is always changing. That's the reality of reality. So I have some excitement for Star Wars. I'm looking forward to the new season of Ahsoka, because I feel like it's going to introduce a little bit more of kind of the fantasy elements into it, which I think will fit nicely with Star Wars. It's going to have a little more of the mystical involved, whereas Andor was much more the gritty kind of reality of politics and war and all of that. I think Ahsoka is going to have a lot more of the fantasy elements that will be very attractive to those audience that like fantasy style storytelling. So I think that will be a good addition. I'm excited to see the slate of movies that are coming out with bated anticipation, because I know from experience that some of these can turn out to be real stinkers, but I'm going to try to remain positive about it. I'm still trying to get used to the idea of these movies that are going to have big A-list actors, as Star Wars hasn't traditionally relied on that kind of star power to kind of promote itself. So that's kind of a new thing that Disney is doing, and I'm waiting to see how well that translates in this particular franchise that hasn't traditionally had that. So it's odd for me to have Ryan Gosling's name attached to a big Star Wars film and immediately think that that's a positive thing, but I'm going to wait and see how that turns out. So I think Star Wars is something that's been with me my whole life. I mean, it was just a few weeks before my 6th birthday when my dad took me to see that original film, and I've been hooked ever since. And I'm in my early 50s now, and Star Wars is a big fandom of mine. It's, you walk into my house and it's evident that I'm a Star Wars fan. And so it is something that I do have a passion for, but I also keep myself in check by realizing that it is a fandom. It is entertainment. It is a lore that I've chosen to be very attached to. But it is not something that should make me, that should divide me from other people. It's not something that is so important that it should cause me to look at somebody else with any kind of disdain or disappointment or disrespect because they don't see that particular franchise in the same way that I do. That's ridiculous. And I think as a fandom we need to start checking ourselves, and we need to realize that it's a great thing, Star Wars, but it is a form of entertainment. It is a form of folklore, modern day folklore. It is a form of ways to communicate and connect to each other, and it is not ever meant to divide us from each other. And if it does, it's because we are doing that to each other, not the franchise, not the stories. We are choosing to divide ourselves from each other because we are choosing not to accept or respect the views of each other concerning those stories. So that's on us. Disney owns that franchise now, so Disney's going to put their own spin on it, and that's always the way it's going to be. It's like even as fans, the reason we get so invested is because we decide how we want Star Wars to be, and we get very attached to that vision of Star Wars, and we don't want anybody changing it. But that's the nature. That's the nature of stories. That's the nature of lore. That's the nature of any kind of oral communication that we've ever had. Over time, the story changes. Over time, there's retellings, and they are always meant to reflect the time in which they're told. So I'm still excited. That little kid in me, every time I go and sit in that theater, look up at that screen and see that a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Even I just said it now and I got goosebumps. Saying that to this video to you right now gave me goosebumps. So even at my ripe old age, it still gets me. And I'm hoping that, as a fandom, we can come together and we can look at the positives and be positive about what's coming to us. It's like this shouldn't be something that we are divided by. This should be something that we definitely rally around and brings us together. But I am more than happy to hear your opinions on this, because I know there are going to be opinions. And I love to hear people's opinions, because I love to learn to understand why people have those opinions and why they think the things that they do. I love to understand. So if you have any kind of input on this, just leave me a comment and let me know. And you guys take care of yourselves.